It was a bright and peaceful afternoon at Arlington National Cemetery. The sky was blue, and a soft wind moved through the rows of white headstones. Families walked quietly along the paths, some carrying flowers, others standing still in front of names carved into the marble. The air felt heavy with respect. Everyone knew they were standing in a place that held the stories of countless heroes who had given their lives for their country. Near the center of the cemetery stood the tomb of the unknown soldier. It was guarded around the clock by soldiers known as the tomb guards. Rain, snow, heat, or cold, nothing ever stopped their watch. They moved in perfect rhythm, 21 steps in one direction, 21 seconds pause, then 21 steps back. Every motion had meaning. Every sound of their boots hitting the marble was a symbol of respect. Visitors always watched quietly, feeling that this moment was something sacred. That afternoon, one tomb guard was on duty. His uniform was perfect, pressed without a wrinkle. His gloves were spotless white, his rifle shone in the sunlight, and his posture was so straight it looked carved from stone. He did not blink much, did not look at anyone. His eyes stayed fixed ahead, focused on his duty. The crowd around him watched in silence, their faces showing deep admiration. Then, from a distance, came a low rumble engines, loud and rough. 5 motorcycles roared up the road leading to the tomb area. Their engines broke the calm air. Heads turned as the sound grew louder. People frowned, surprised that anyone would make so much noise in such a quiet place. The motorcycles stopped nearby. 5 men got off, all wearing leather jackets and heavy boots. They looked like travelers, sunburned, big in build, and carrying the kind of energy that didn't belong in a quiet place like this. Their helmets came off, and one of them, the leader, looked around with a grin. He was tall, with a rough beard and a loud voice that carried across the path. "Man, look at this guy," he said, nodding toward the guard, standing like a statue. "Must be boring as hell." His friends laughed. Their laughter felt sharp in the silence of the place. Some tourists nearby turned their heads in disapproval. A woman held her little boy's hand tighter and pulled him closer. The tomb guard didn't react. He kept marching, his steps measured and precise. The bikers stood watching, amused. The leader walked a few steps forward, his boots echoing on the stone. "Hey, soldier," he called out loudly. "You even blink, or are you one of those robots?" His friends laughed again. The guard didn't move. He reached the end of his line, turned sharply on his heel, and marched back with the same rhythm. His eyes stayed fixed straight ahead, as if he had heard nothing. The leader smirked. "Look at him, won't even look at me," he said. He stepped even closer, now just a few feet from the marked path where the guard marched. His voice grew louder, his tone teasing. "What are you guarding, man? A box. There's nothing in there." The sound of his words carried across the crowd. People gasped. A few whispered for him to stop. One older man muttered, "Show some respect, son." But the biker didn't care. He looked around, pleased that people were watching. He wanted attention. The tomb guard reached the end of his walk again. He turned, paused for a moment, and then took one powerful step forward. The sharp sound of his heels striking the marble echoed through the air. It was like a single thunderclap. Then, with a firm voice that came from deep in his chest, he spoke words every guard knows well. "It is requested," he said loudly and clearly, "that everyone maintain silence and respect in this sacred place." His voice wasn't angry. It was strong and commanding, like it carried the weight of every fallen soldier behind it. The leader froze mid-smile. His friends stopped laughing. The tourists fell completely silent. The air felt suddenly heavy again. The biker took a step back, trying to act unfazed. "Hey, easy, man," he said, raising his hand slightly. But his tone had lost its strength. He looked around as if expecting someone to laugh with him, but no one did. Every eye in the crowd was on him, and none were friendly for a few seconds. There was silence again, the kind of silence that makes you feel small. The guard turned back into position and resumed his march. His face showed no emotion, no sign that anything had happened. His every move was measured, controlled, perfect. But the leader's pride didn't let it go. He turned back toward his friends. "Come on," he muttered. "We're just talking. What's the big deal? He walked closer again, shaking his head. Man, this guy takes himself too seriously. The other bikers hesitated. One of them whispered, "Dude, maybe stop." But the leader ignored him. He stepped over the thin chain that marked the edge of the guard's walkway. The crowd gasped again. The biker had crossed into forbidden ground. Before anyone could speak, the guard stopped marching. He turned sharply and faced the man. The movement was so fast and exact it made everyone step back instinctively. The guard's hand moved smoothly to his rifle. He lowered it to his side in a ready standstill, calm, still disciplined. But his message was clear. You will not cross this line. The biker froze. His heart began to pound. For a second, it felt as if time had stopped. The guard's eyes locked onto his. There was no anger there, only a kind of quiet power that came from purpose. The sound of boots echoed again. Two more guards appeared from the sides, their steps as synchronized as a drumbeat. They didn't need to speak. They simply took position beside their comrade, forming a silent wall of discipline and authority. From behind the crowd, a pair of park security officers began to move quickly toward the scene. The tourists backed away to give them room. No one said a word. The biker's face turned pale. His hands, once bold, now hung awkwardly by his sides. One of the officers reached him first. "Sir, step back behind the chain, please," the officer said quietly but firmly. The biker nodded quickly and stepped back. His boots clicked against the marble. He didn't look at anyone. The guard remained still for a moment, then turned back into his position and resumed his walk as though nothing had happened. His boots hit the marble with the same steady rhythm: left, right, pause, turn. The ritual of honor continued, unbroken. The bikers moved off to the side. Their earlier energy was gone. They whispered to each other, their faces red. The tourists who had been filming put their phones down slowly, still watching in disbelief. A young boy in the crowd tugged his mother's hand and whispered, "Mom." Why was that man mean to the soldier? She bent down and said softly, "Because some people forget what others sacrificed for them." The boy nodded, watching the guard with new eyes. The leader of the bikers leaned against his motorcycle. His voice was low now, almost a mutter. "Didn't think he'd react like that," he said. His friend answered quietly, "Man, you shouldn't have said anything. This isn't a place for jokes." They waited there for a few more minutes, unsure what to do. The crowd had gone back to watching the guard, but the air felt different now. The visitors stood a little straighter, their faces more serious. The sound of the guard's footsteps carried across the plaza, and every strike of his heel seemed to remind everyone of what respect meant. The biker looked at the guard again. He noticed something he hadn't before: the sharp shine of the uniform buttons, the careful polish of the rifle, the deep focus in the guard's eyes. Every detail spoke of endless hours of training, of pride and service. It was not a show. It was a promise. He thought of the laughter they had shared minutes earlier. It felt foolish now, almost shameful. He remembered how easily the guard's single command had stopped him cold. No anger, no threats, just pure discipline. It was the kind of strength he realized he didn't understand. The guard turned again, facing the direction where the biker stood, and marched forward. Their eyes met for the briefest second, and the biker looked away first. Something inside him felt small, humbled, and silent. Round the plaza, the crowd stayed quiet, as if they too were holding their breath. The guard's routine continued: 21 steps, pause, turn, 21 steps back. The pattern was beautiful in its simplicity. Each step felt like a heartbeat, steady and eternal. The leader finally spoke again, his voice softer than before. "Let's go," he said to his friends. They didn't argue. They started their engines, but even that sound felt too loud now. They rolled their bikes away slowly, heads down. As they left the grounds, the leader looked once more over his shoulder. The guard was still marching, unshaken, proud, and unbroken. The biker felt something he hadn't expected, a kind of respect he couldn't explain. He didn't say a word for a long time after that. Back near the gate, an older veteran sitting on a bench looked up as the bikers passed. The veteran wore a faded cap that said Korea, 1953. He had been watching everything. As the bikers walked by, he said quietly, he wasn't guarding a box. He was guarding everyone who never made it home. The words hit the leader like a punch in the chest. He nodded once, not trusting himself to speak. They got on their bikes and rode away. But the roar of their engines couldn't drown out the sound that stayed in the leader's head. The echo of that single command from the guard and the deep silence that followed. It was the kind of silence that teaches a man something he can never forget. That night, long after the sun had gone down, the leader sat alone outside the small motel where they were staying. The laughter from earlier in the day was gone. He stared at his hands. The next morning, the same 5 bikers sat quietly outside a small diner near the edge of town. Their motorcycles were parked side by side, but for the first time, none of them spoke with pride about their ride. The leader, whose name was Jack, stared into his cup of coffee, his face tired and thoughtful. The others looked at him, unsure what to say. They had been friends for years, always traveling together, chasing roads and freedom. They were loud, bold, and proud of being fearless. But the moment from yesterday, those 60 seconds in front of the tomb, had shaken something inside them. Jack hadn't slept much that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that soldier's face, calm, strong, unmoving. He remembered how his own laughter had died the second the guard spoke. That voice still echoed in his head. It wasn't anger. It was discipline. It was something pure. Man, that guy wasn't normal, said one of the bikers finally, breaking the silence. The way he moved, the way he stood there, it was like he was part of something bigger. Jack didn't look up. He said quietly, he was guarding the unknown, the ones who never came home, and we treated it like a show. His friends went silent again. The sound of cars passing outside filled the gap. After breakfast, they rode out of the city. But this time the roar of their engines felt different. None of them revved their bikes the way they usually did. The ride was quiet. They didn't even talk through their headsets. Each man was lost in his own thoughts. When they reached a small gas station a few miles from Arlington, Jack stopped. I'm going back, he said suddenly. His friends looked at him, confused. Back to the cemetery? He nodded. I disrespected that man. I disrespected the people he guards. I need to set it right. They exchanged looks. One of them sighed. You really think it matters? Jack stared at him. It matters to me. Without another word, he turned his bike around and rode off. The others followed after a moment, one by one, until all 5 engines were moving down the same road again. As they approached the gates of Arlington, the guards at the entrance recognized them. They slowed down immediately. Jack stopped his motorcycle and took off his helmet. His voice was calm but respectful. Sir, we came back to apologize, he said. The officer at the gate looked at them for a long moment, then nodded. Park your bikes outside. You can walk in. They did as they were told. No one spoke. Their boots clicked on the path as they walked through the rows of white stones. The sound of their footsteps echoed faintly. The air felt cooler that day, but the silence was still the same, heavy and sacred. When they reached the tomb, a small crowd was already there. The same guard from yesterday was on duty. Jack's heart beat faster when he saw him. The guard looked exactly the same, calm, focused, strong. His every movement was measured. Jack took off his leather jacket and held it in his hand. He didn't want to look like the same man who had caused trouble. He took a few steps forward but stopped well behind the chain. The guard turned at the end of his line and began his next 21 steps. The sound of his boots hitting the marble echoed softly. Each click felt like a heartbeat in the air. When the guard paused, Jack took a deep breath and spoke in a low voice. Sir, he said quietly, not loud enough to disturb anyone else, I'm sorry for yesterday. I didn't understand. The guard didn't move, didn't look at him, didn't reply. His duty was to protect, not to engage. But somehow, that made the moment feel even more meaningful. Jack stayed there for several minutes, standing in silence. His friends did too. They didn't speak or shuffle or check their phones. They just watched. For the first time in their lives, they felt the weight of real honor, not the kind you show off, but the kind you carry quietly. An older man nearby, dressed in a veteran's jacket, noticed them. He walked over and said softly, "You boys the ones from yesterday?" Jack nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. We made a mistake." The man looked at him carefully, then smiled faintly. "Takes courage to come back and admit that," he said. "That guard, he represents every man and woman who gave everything. You saw what respect looks like yesterday. Don't forget it." Jack nodded again, his throat tight. "I won't, sir." They stood there for a long while, just watching. No words were needed. The guard kept walking, his rhythm steady and perfect, the sunlight glinting off his rifle. The precision, the silence, it all felt like a prayer. When the ceremony changed shifts, they witnessed the new guard take over. The inspection, the exchange, the salute, every motion was slow, precise, and meaningful. It was like watching history come alive. The crowd stayed completely quiet, many with tears in their eyes. Jack felt something deep inside him shift. He realized that strength wasn't about shouting, fighting, or proving you're tough. Real strength was discipline. It was control. It was doing your duty even when no one was watching. When the ceremony ended, Jack approached one of the nearby officers. "Sir," he asked softly, "is there a way to thank the guard? I don't want to disturb him." The officer smiled. "The best way to thank him," he said, "is to carry the respect you feel right now into the rest of your life." Jack nodded. He understood perfectly. Before they left, he took a small patch from his jacket, a symbol from their biker club, and placed it on the ground near the outer wall, far from the tomb but close enough to show his intent. It wasn't for attention. It was a personal gesture. It was his way of saying sorry and thank you at the same time. As they walked back to their bikes, Jack looked one last time at the guard. The man hadn't moved, hadn't shown a hint of acknowledgement, but Jack didn't need it. He knew the guard's job wasn't to respond. It was to stand, to represent all who couldn't stand anymore. The ride away from Arlington was quiet. The road stretched ahead of them, but something had changed. The air felt lighter, and so did their hearts. None of them played loud music this time. None of them talked. They all felt the same unspoken truth. They had been taught a lesson, not by words, but by silence. A few days later, they stopped at a small roadside diner in another state. A TV above the counter showed a short news clip. It was a video from Arlington. Tourists had filmed the moment from yesterday, when the guard had confronted the disrespect. The headline read, "Tomb Guard stands firm, crowd silenced in seconds." Jack froze, watching it play. There he was on the screen, stepping forward, shouting, acting foolish. Then the guard's sharp turn, his commanding voice, and the stunned silence that followed. The whole thing lasted less than a minute, but it felt longer watching it again. The clip had gone viral. The comments on the screen were full of admiration for the guard's composure. "That soldier didn't need to yell or fight," one comment read. "That's what discipline looks like." Jack sighed. He felt embarrassed, but also thankful. "Maybe it's good people saw it," he said quietly. "Maybe they'll understand what I learned." His friends nodded. "Yeah," one said. "We all needed that wake-up call." A woman sitting nearby overheard them. She smiled kindly and said, "You know, my brother was buried there last year. What those guards do means the world to us. Thank you for understanding that." Jack didn't know what to say. He just nodded respectfully. "We do now, ma'am," he said. The woman smiled and placed her hand over her heart. "That's all that matters." As the days passed, the memory of that afternoon stayed with them. Their next rides were different. They no longer made noise near memorials or parades. They slowed down when they passed small cemeteries and towns. Sometimes they even stopped, took off their caps, and stood in silence for a minute. The other bikers noticed the change in Jack. He spoke less, but his words carried more meaning now. He started talking about respect, about self-control, about how real men didn't need to prove their strength through arrogance. His friends listened because they knew he wasn't preaching. He was sharing something real. Months later, when Memorial Day came, Jack and his friends rode back to Arlington. This time they came quietly, wearing simple clothes. They carried a small bouquet of flowers, not for anyone they knew personally, but for the unknown soldier, the one who stood for all. They walked to the tomb again. where another guard was on duty. They stood at a distance, watching the same precise movements, the same silent discipline. They laid the flowers near the wall, bowed their heads, and stood still. No one around them knew who they were or what had happened months before. But for Jack and his friends, it didn't matter. They knew they were different men now. They understood something they never had before, that silence can be louder than words, and respect can be stronger than pride. When they walked back to their bikes, a little boy standing with his father looked up at Jack. "Are you soldiers?" The boy asked. Jack smiled. "No, son," he said softly, "but we met one who taught us how to act like men." The father smiled too, nodding in agreement. "Then you met the right kind," he said. As the bikers rode away down the long road out of Arlington, the air was calm, and their engines seemed quieter than ever. The sunlight glowed softly over the cemetery behind them, where the guard still marched, unbroken, keeping watch as he always did. Jack looked in his side mirror one last time. The white rose faded into the distance, but the feeling stayed inside him, that quiet, powerful moment when he had been brought down not by force, but by honor. He smiled faintly beneath his helmet. Down in 60 seconds, he whispered to himself, but lifted for life.